So the true nature of the mind is the clarity, is the openness, transparency, and luminosity. So the mind is actually aware of itself and recognizes itself, and also it can rest in that knowing as well. However, when we begin to think, we seem to set the mind in motion. And so, in other words, we activate the thinking mind. And we wind up even more when we create thoughts based on expectations, fears, causes, and consequences. So in other words, we become caught in the past. So basically what we're doing most of the time, we are revisiting what happened, what we did wrong, then returning to the same situations, regretting them, trying to override the situations, as if we try to change what has already occurred. And then we become occupied with the future and all the fears it may contain, because those fears are based on the past experience. So the mind begins to create plans and strategies to avoid the failure and mistakes because they are associated with the pain. In other words, with the experiences and feelings, sensations we have in our physical body, because when we experience pain, being that emotional pain or sensual pain, we still experience that in the body. However, the mind itself cannot feel. So the feelings, emotions, and bodily sensations belong to a quite different aspect of our experience, and that's our emotional body or the astral body. So this is how our system develops protective mechanism. So we try to use the mind to solve what is essentially an emotional experience. Yet there is no mind in the world that can fully process feelings, emotions, or sensations, because that is not its function. So a different department. And what comes to pain, I would say that pain often arises when reality does not meet the expectations or the attachments or the plans we have created based on our desires. So we want life to unfold in a certain way because we believe that it will make us feel good about ourselves, it makes us feel safe, it makes us feel accepted or fulfilled. So, but in life, the life and the situation, or that given situation, particular situation, or just life in general, is happening to everyone at the same time. So each person carries their own ideas about how life or how this specific situation should unfold in order for them to feel happy and complete. So because if that were possible, we would end up in this situation much like in the movie The Bruce Almighty, where the God answered everyone's prayers with a yes. So the result wasn't the harmony. The result was a chaos, because people's wishes, expectations, and desires often contradict one another. So life cannot unfold according to everyone's personal plan at the same time. Yet we often expect it to. And when it doesn't, so we experience that disappointment, frustration, or in other words, that pain. So this is why the mind remains so busy, so constantly trying to predict, control, and arrange life according to its preferences, instead of meeting the reality as it is. And as a result, we keep the mind constantly busy, so trying to control, trying to predict and manage life, instead of allowing it to do the job. And it's naturally designed. What the mind is naturally designed for is to calculate, to describe, organize information, and help us navigate practical reality. So when we ask the mind to provide emotional security, certainty or lasting fulfillment, we burden it with a responsibility it was never meant to carry. So what comes to the meditations and the thoughts and the mind, that's another aspect, pretty interesting, very important aspect, and very challenging aspect, at least this is what the people believe, that meditation is supposed to silence the mind. Or especially at the beginning of meditation, or particularly for beginners, so the mind finds it difficult to remain still, right? This is something similar for a small child to keep its attention in one place. So the mind's nature, or this is how the mind does, it naturally moves. So also what happens during the meditation, that you also begin to notice thoughts, and you begin to notice the mind, because usually it goes sort of unseen, because you are normally running alongside those ideas, those thoughts, alongside the mind. So in the modern meditation, you are redirecting your focus, your attention, and you're literally looking at the mind. So as awareness becomes clearer through the meditation, because awareness is beyond the mind, this is what basically we are practicing during the meditation in the first place. So you begin to see these thoughts more distantly. And if you allow them to appear without suppressing them, without becoming involved in endless analysis, inner gossip, or struggle, or challenge to silence the mind, they will gradually pass and settle on their own. So, in other words, that waterfall of the thoughts naturally begins to quiet down, because during the meditation we learn how not to feed longer the mind with the new stories, interpretations, or attention. So this is how the mind gradually stops developing thoughts into entire narratives. So what actually happens, that instead of approaching the mind from a place of participation, so again, being fully engaged with the mind dialogue, we begin to approach it from a different place, and that place is observation, or awareness, if you like. So this is what it means actually to be aware. And then with the time and experience, that this observation position becomes more stable and more sort of fixated and more automatic. So even though the thoughts, they may still arise, they gradually move into the background. Sort of they no longer occupy the center of your experience, and we become increasingly able to transcend them rather than be carried away by them. Transcend, that means that we are able to focus and become aware more of the foreground of what it truly is. And the mind moves to the background, and we hear the mind, something similar to the TV in the next room. So there is a common belief that we need to get rid of the mind also, because it makes us feel restless, distracted, and caught up in thoughts. Well, I can reassure you that yet we still need the mind. So the mind itself is quite a complex construct, let's put it this way. So the mind has many layers, so to speak, and functions. And at the end of the day, it plays an important role in the process of realization, and however, it does not ignite realization itself. And I really want to make it clear here that the spiritual realization comes through direct experience first. Only afterward is that experience understood, integrated, and realized more deeply. So in other words, the mind participates in this process, helping us make sense of what has been realized, experienced, and gradually dipping into this understanding what it truly was. And it does not happen the other way around. So that means that you cannot think of or understand mentally the spiritual realization. In other words, we do not think our way into the realization. Rather, the realization comes through the experience, and the mind then supports its integration and expression. So again, back to this belief that we must somehow get rid of the mind. So we often find ourselves drawn into that kind of Hunger Games with our own thoughts. I hope that's no issue with the copyright here. So the mind basically becomes our enemy. So enemy meaning something we try to silence, we try to suppress, we try to avoid, or in a sense get rid of altogether. So this inner battle, this mental battle, is really exhausting, because thoughts continue to arise no matter what we do, isn't it? So over the time, some people even begin to dislike or distrust their own minds, just because it seems that the mind becomes to self-sabotage itself. So as a result, many come to believe that the purpose of the meditation, again, is the silence of the mind, and just in general, the spirituality, this is what the mind not only becomes silenced, but this is where we are attaining that pure state of peace and silence and clarity. And that peace actually can only be found once those thoughts disappear. But again, the mind is much more complex than that. And the mind is not actually a single thing. It has, again, different layers, functions, and expressions. So understanding those levels or these layers can help us develop a healthier and more realistic relationship with it.